right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for attending this first session of our AALS section on technology, law, and legal education summer webinar series. It's nice to hear that we are officially in summer with the start of this series, I guess. We're excited to share with you today's session on creating, building, and growing law and technology centers, the why, the what, and the how. My name is Leanne Futh. I'm an associate professor and dean of career and professional development at Mitchell-Hamline School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the section on technology webinar committee. Before I introduce the moderator for today's panel, I just want to say a couple of things about logistics so we know sort of how today's session will run. We're going to go for about an hour today. Some of our later webinars will actually be 45 minutes, but we have an awesome panel with us today. And so we've allowed an hour for today's discussion in particular. Our moderator and panelists will each have an opportunity to speak and share their thoughts on today's topic, and then we'll reserve time at the end for Q&A. To ask any questions, please type your questions into the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can type your questions in at any point in time throughout the webinar. We will all be able to see those. We'll reserve particular time for questions at the end, but we'll also, if questions seem relevant to the discussion as we go, we may address them as we go. So feel free to put them in. You don't need to hold them till the end. Type them in whenever they come to you. Today's webinar and all of the webinars in this summer series are being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing after our session. You can access the recorded webinars by going to the AALS section on technology webpage. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will receive an email from us with the handouts from today's session, as well as with a survey link. And we hope that you'll take a few minutes to complete that survey. Your feedback is really important to us on today's session, as with all of our sessions, and it informs the topics and the format that we use for future presentations. So we hope you take a moment to do that. That completes our logistics. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's webinar. April Dawson is Associate Dean of Technology and Innovation and Professor of Law at North Carolina Central University School of Law. April is also the other co-chair of the section on technology webinar committee, and as the sort of paired co-chair with her, it's just an absolute pleasure to work with her on this committee this year and last year. April is particularly well suited to be moderating today's discussion on law and technology centers and co-chairing our webinar committee because she comes to legal practice and legal education with a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science, and she was a computer programmer before attending law school. So she has a special expertise as well as interest in the topics that we will be discussing today and we do through this webinar series. April has also written and spoken frequently about legal pedagogy, the use of technology in legal education, law and technology, including at such events and programs as the ABA Tech Show 2020 and the ABA Tech Show 2021, where she recently spoke on the law of technology versus law practice technology courses, who should teach and how to design. April, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to moderate today's discussion and introduce our esteemed panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Leanne. And I'm going to resume sharing. And I'm going to jump straight into introduction of our wonderful panelists. We're actually going to have this session be 75 minutes. Actually, we're going to go until 3:15. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, and we want to make sure that we have enough time for you all to hear what our wonderful panelists have to say. And so we're going to start with Gabe Tenenbaum, who I'm sure many of you know. He is the Assistant Dean for Innovation, Strategic Initiatives, and Distance Education, as well as a Professor of Legal Writing at Suffolk University Law School. As many of us know, Suffolk has been ranked on multiple occasions by National Jurist Magazine and Pre-Law Magazine as having the #1 legal tech program in the nation. And the program has thrived under Gabe's leadership. He is the founder of the award-winning software company for legal education, Spaced Repetition. Gabe is also the current chair of our wonderful AALS section on technology. Our next panelist is Laura Norris. She is a founding director of Santa Clara Law's innovative Tech Ed JD program and Entrepreneurs Law Clinic, a co-director of the High Tech Law Institute, and an associate clinical professor. Laura teaches topics including startup law, intellectual property, venture capital funding, and in-house legal practice. She also maintains a solo legal practice advising mostly private technology companies in all stages of growth. Laura is a past chair of our wonderful AALS section on technology. And it was under her leadership that we started this section's summer webinar series in 2019. Our next panelist is Nicole Morris, who is a professor in practice at Emory Law and director of the Tiger program. And I'm going to let Nicole explain what that acronym stands for, but it is an innovative partnership between Emory and Georgia Tech, only one of its kind. Nicole was a chemical engineer for 6 years with 3M and Eli Lilly before attending law school. And not surprisingly, as a professor in practice, her areas of expertise include patent law, patent litigation, patent prosecution, IP licensing, and strategy. And our last panelist for today, last but not least, is Jeff Ward, who is an associate dean or the associate dean for technology and innovation and clinical professor of law at Duke University School of Law, where he also serves as director of the Duke Center of Law and Tech. He teaches courses at the intersection of law, ethics, and emerging technologies such as blockchain, AI, robotics at both Duke Law and Duke's Pratt School of Engineering. Jeff oversees the Duke Law Tech Lab, which is a pre-accelerator for legal technology companies, and the Access Tech Tool Initiative, and he will have an opportunity to talk about both. So these were, by design, relatively straightforward, short introductions and bios for our panelists, but I strongly encourage you to take a look at their full bios. They're amazing individuals who have a lot to offer on this topic about how to go about designing a tech center. And before I turn it over, just a few things that I want to say to kind of set the stage. And so we know that, and the fact that you are participating in this webinar, you know that we need to be teaching more tech to our law students. So I don't think there's any doubt that law schools need to and certainly can do more. Just a couple of points that I wanted to raise is that when we think about the need to teach tech, like why is it so crucial? So the ABA has tech requirements. So when we're thinking about ethical responsibilities for lawyers, the ABA recognizes that tech competency falls under ethical competencies. There are states that actually now require that lawyers actually take certain hours. North Carolina is one of those states. Florida is one of those states where in order to maintain your state bar license, you actually have to take as part of your CLE classes, tech-related classes, so very similar to ethics classes. There is higher client demand for more efficient and cost-effective lawyering. So if a lawyer can engage or do some work that with the use of technology will only take 2 hours, and without technology would take 40 hours, clients are absolutely demanding that lawyers utilize technology to be more efficient. There's also an ethical obligation for lawyers to utilize technology in a way that allows for them to better represent their clients. Emerging tech-related issues in traditional fields. So even if you have lawyers or law students who are interested in some of the typical traditional fields, family law, dispute resolution, criminal law, all of our traditional fields also include tech components. So law students, lawyers need to know about how emerging technologies are changing or impacting traditional fields. Also, there are new and emerging technologies that require legal advice. So when we think about robotics, when we think about artificial intelligence, when we think about data analytics, these are new emerging areas, and there's a need for lawyers who are familiar with these areas so that they can appropriately represent and advise their clients. Also, the use of technology is being embraced by the courts and our governmental agencies. And we know that when it comes to, we're all officers of the court as lawyers, when it comes to engaging with the judicial branch, when it comes to engaging with governmental agencies, being familiar with technology is a requirement as well. It's necessary. So the last thing that I'll just hit upon before I turn it over to Gabe is, as legal educators, we really do need to think about what the law will look like in the future. We have to be forward thinking. We can't just teach law the way we may have been taught law 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. And when we're thinking about how to be as effective as possible when it comes to educating our students, we have to ask ourselves, where will the legal profession be in 5 years, for example? How will lawyers be using technology to perform their jobs? So when we think about law practice technology, and what technology areas will require legal expertise? So if we talk about law of technology, what will the practice demand? How will the practice change? And then we need to ask ourselves, where should law schools be 5 years from now, so that we can make sure that we adequately prepare our students for the future practice of law. And in order to make sure we are where we need to be 5 years from now, we really do have to start thinking about it and making changes now. And that is the reason why we wanted to have and kind of kick off this summer webinar series with this particular session. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gabe, and he is going to talk with us about the Suffolk Law School's Institute on Legal Innovation and Technology.
Thank you, April, and thank you, Leanne, for facilitating both today and for putting together this wonderful series. And most of all, welcome and thank you to you all out there in attendance. This is a wonderful topic, and I'm glad to spend a little time talking through it with you today. So April, would you advance one for me? So let me talk a little bit about what we've done at Suffolk. We started our Legal Innovation and Technology program back in 2013. The wonderful Dean Camille Nelson, who's now at University of Hawaii, was interested in this topic. We had a number of faculty members who thought that this was the wave of the future, and we created an institute by which we could coordinate all sorts of interesting activities around promoting legal innovation and technology for our students and for the community around us. And I'm a legal writing professor from way back. I haven't taught that in several years because I've been so involved with this, but I believe in giving the bottom line up front. So April, would you advance once? We made a bet that the future of legal work would look a lot different for the next generation than it had for past generations. And I just want to give a set of bio lines for graduates of our Legal Innovation and Technology program. And the thing that I think is that most interesting about what they've done is that they are taking on jobs that, quite frankly, didn't exist 10 years ago. And a lot of that is because there's a remarkable new demand in law firms and in law departments for people that have these skills. But the other piece, quite candidly, is that there hasn't been enough students to fill this demand. And by and large, organizations have come to Suffolk and said, do you have people? As the number of organizations grow that have these sorts of programs, I look forward to seeing the wealth spread to other places. So advance, please, April. I want to talk about 4 things that we did to get where we are today. And all of these are sort of bolt-ons. We started at the beginning with the lowest cost, easiest things, and then we've moved along a continuum to things that are more time-consuming, resource intensive, and require just more institutional inertia to work. So we started in 2013 with an academic concentration, just a collection of courses that we would offer to our students. And if they completed that set of courses, they would get a notation on their diploma that said that they had completed the LIT concentration. That's legal innovation in technology. So there are 3 core pieces to our LIT concentration. One is a class in tech tools. It's a hands-on class. We have one version called Lawyering in an Age of Smart Machines, which teaches sort of enterprise level tools in document assembly and expert systems. The other is called Legal Tech for Small Firms, which is the small firm version of the same course. So we wanted people to get hands-on experience. 2, we wanted them to think about new business models. So we teach a course called 21st Century Legal Profession that covers every way to make money and to serve clients in law other than doing billable hours and contingent fee. It's a new law business model course. And then 3rd and finally, we require all of the students in this program to do a course on process improvement and legal project management. So we have an outside expert who serves as an adjunct faculty member. She comes in, gives the course. The students who complete the course earn a yellow belt. For those who are part of the Lean Six Sigma world, they use karate belts to signify expertise. And the students who complete the course earn that credential. So those 3 core courses are taken by everyone in the LIT concentration. On top of that, they complete a number of credits in electives that are related to this topic area. So for the really hands-on people, they might take a class in Python coding for lawyers or data science. For people that are less interested in using computers to do their work, they might take a course in design thinking or law practice management. What we want to do is get people thinking about new ways to deliver legal services. And of course, this stuff doesn't just happen in the classroom. Everyone who completes our LIT concentration has an outside experience, whether it's an internship, a paid job, or otherwise. The idea here is that we want to teach people a set of skills and then give them an opportunity to get trained in those skills. And we, of course, supervise it, making sure that they're getting appropriate feedback along the way so that they can really sort of reflect on what it is that they've learned. So we've had dozens and dozens of students complete the concentration and earn that notation on their diploma over the last few years. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of students take some piece of it that's relevant to their future. Next slide, please, April. From there, we said, geez, we're doing a wonderful job with our students. They're happy, they're getting jobs, we're getting positive feedback. And when I and others in the program go talk about what we're doing, the most common question that we get from people outside the law school is, well, how can I do that? When I went to law school, this wasn't a thing. You couldn't take a legal tech course. So we created our own product and made it available to people in the community outside of Suffolk Law. So anyone who's not a Suffolk Law student can go to legaltechcertificate.com and they can take this program, which effectively takes the best of our in-person JD courses and makes it available to legal professionals from around the world. So we've had in the hundreds of people that have completed this program or at least participated in this program from 6 different continents. If you know anyone from Antarctica, we're looking for that person. We'll even give them a scholarship. But it's been a really, really cool opportunity to get people from outside Suffolk's JD program thinking about these skills, learning these skills, and advancing their own careers. Third, one more slide, please, April. We started collaborating very, very vigorously with outside partners in a few different ways. One is, unlike some programs in other disciplines, we're really welcoming of vendors. And what we tell vendors that come into our program is, if you have a skill that we think our students should learn, we want you to help us teach our students that skill. It's terrific if you give the students a goodie like free access to the tool after they graduate, but as long as you're willing to come in, show off the tool, help students learn how to use it, and it has some pedagogical value to do it, we welcome you. So companies like Clio and Wordrig have been just wonderful partners in terms of giving our students access and teaching them about how to use these technologies. There are also a number of corporate partners that we've taken on, and we've created relationships so that as we train students in legal innovation and technology, they hold spots in their summer programs so that students can come in and do sort of a traditional clerkship program with some of the work time being set aside for innovation and tech work. So Liberty Mutual Insurance is the biggest employer in Massachusetts. 50 some odd thousand people in Massachusetts work for them. And every year they hold a spot or two. So a student from our LIT program can come there and do some in-house work of the traditional nature, but also a process improvement project or learn something about the data analysis work that Liberty is doing. So that's been a really important piece of what we're doing because it creates relationships, it creates jobs, and it's been a nice way to help the ecosystem improve. One more, please. And then the last thing that we've done most recently has been the most labor intensive and the most costly. We launched our own research and development lab. So we had gotten to the point where students had learned the basic skills, some of them sort of low-code, no-code tools, others more sophisticated pieces of technology, and they were looking for projects to build. So we said, well, maybe what we can do is we can create a center, the LIT Lab is what we've called it, where under guidance, students can develop those projects into things that get launched into the world and help with the access to justice crisis, help them launch their own businesses, or help them get a job because they've developed skills actually in product development. So the LIT Lab has been a super successful operation over the last couple of years. We found grant funders like the Pew Charitable Trust who have funded wonderful projects that we continue to work on that have started to make a real difference in the world. I put up a slide here for the Mass Courts Online project. During the COVID crisis, the courts couldn't see anyone in person, of course, but that didn't mean that there was no need to help people with legal problems. They came to us and said, how about if we work together? Your team at the LIT Lab builds a set of tools so that people can be seen for the most important civil hearings like domestic violence, lockout evictions, and guardianship without having to come into court. So the team, using skills that they learned in class and under the leadership of our LIT Lab staff, built out a suite of tools that have helped thousands and thousands of people over the last year and will continue to expand it in the future. So those are 4 things that we've done. And I just have a minute left because there are other people that have wonderful things to say and I want to sit back and listen to them. But let me close with 3 pieces of advice for people that are considering building a program like this. 1, start with things that don't cost a lot of money. The LIT concentration was just a collection of classes that we already had or wanted to offer. There is virtually no cost to collecting a bunch of classes as one and saying, this is a certificate program. You don't even have to make it a certificate program if the registrar's office doesn't want to create a new concentration or certificate. The idea here is just look at the resources that you have and figure out how you want to brand them. For the first couple of years of our program, the LIT Institute lived under my hat. There was no physical space. It was just an idea. But as we gained momentum, we were able to get more resources. So that's 1. 2, as you start to kick off a program, please invite outside speakers to come and talk to your faculty. I think that was the single most important thing we did back in the early 2010s. We were thinking about this sort of program. There were some people that said, is this the direction that we want to go? And we invited in well-respected people that had already started thinking about legal innovation and technology to give faculty luncheon talks and talk about the changing legal workplace and what their programs were doing in business and law and elsewhere. And it was really, really influential. I'm glad to do it if anyone needs a warm body, but I would encourage you to reach out to the others on this call because each and every one of them could give a killer faculty lunch talk, which would help move the needle. And then third and finally, find a community for yourself. If you're not a member of the AALS section on tech law and legal ed, if you're teach at a school that is a member, it's free. If not, you can still go to programs like this and benefit from them. Finding your community is a really, really valuable tool to help your thinking and also just to find common cause with others thinking about the same sort of thing. So I want to pause so that I can turn it over to others, and I'll look forward to hearing from the rest and further conversations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabe. There are questions in the Q&A. I encourage you all to continue to put in your questions after all of the panelists have had a chance to go through their slides and share their general information. We will go through these questions, some of which have already been answered. So keep up with those questions. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Norris, and she's going to talk about Santa Clara University School of Law and their Law and Tech program.
Thank you, April. I want to start by correcting the record a little bit from what April said at the beginning, and that is, she said that it was under my leadership that this webinar series was created. And even though I was technically the chair of the AALS Technology and Legal Education section at the time. It was all April's idea. So congratulations, April, and thank you. You can advance the next slide. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to talk about two different centers today. I have kind of busy slides, which I normally don't do, but I wanted to make sure that all the information's there so that folks that want to look at it later have it. I'm going to talk about two different programs that I am a director of. One, I am a director of the High Tech Law Institute at Santa Clara University. And then second, I am the director of the TechEdge JD program. One has been around for 23 years, so I'm going to give a perspective of that and how to keep that center relevant. And one is relatively new and very experimental, and I'm going to give an explanation of that. I also want to say that I started the Entrepreneurs Law Clinic at Santa Clara 8 years ago. Not going to talk about that, but if anyone has questions or wants advice on how to start a law clinic and grow it, email me and I'm happy to talk about it after the fact. But now going to the High Tech Law Institute. So High Tech Law Institute, like I said, has been around since 1998. And so it is a well-established center, and I've been a director of it for, now I forget, 4 or 5 years now. Here's the things that it does underneath the High Tech Law Institute. The responsibilities are we do academic administration, events, marketing, and then support our student organizations. And just a little bit about each of those areas. On the academic administration, Santa Clara has 31 courses that are specifically at the intersection of law and technology. So it's quite a large number. And so what the High Tech Law Institute does is we are always vetting adjuncts and working with the dean's office to try to find people to teach those classes, because they're not all taught by full-time faculty. And then also making sure that those classes are offered at a certain regular intervals to be able to allow our students to be able to get, for instance, certificates that might require those courses and they don't overlap and whatnot, right? So we're working with the dean's office very closely and our registrar to ensure that the curriculum looks correct with respect to high tech. We deal with students from 5 different degree programs. We have 2 joint JD programs. We have the JD program and then 2 LLM programs. And then the High Tech Law Certificate has 6 certificates underneath it that show up on the students' transcript and diploma if they complete the certificates. And so the High Tech Law Institute has those certificates as well and is answering student questions and helping to administer the certificates. And then also we have a High Tech Law Journal. And so we also will work with our High Tech Law Journal on activities that they're doing. Events, we support scholarship through Works in Progress by having faculty come in for 2 different big works in progress that occur at our school, Internet Law and Intellectual Property. We work with extracurriculars such as high-tech competitions like the USPTO patent drafting competition. We have a high-tech career fair, and we also do a hackathon every year where students work with programmers to come up with solutions relating to criminal justice. We also have external facing events for the professional community where we give continuing legal education, and we run our own in-house counsel institute every year on an annual basis to teach young lawyers how they can transition to an in-house position, but then we also partner with various organizations. And we have 9 different student organizations relating to high tech. We also, so with respect to that center, staffing pretty good. We've got some full-time staff, a managing director and a program manager, usually have a student intern or fellow or recent grad fellow. And then with faculty directors, I'm a co-director. There's 2 of us that do like kind of the day-to-day working with the staff. And then it's up to 6 though, because there's 4 of our colleagues that are kind of more like advising co-directors. We all hold the title of co-director. So we have a good number of people involved in this center. Funding for the center, we have a quasi endowment that was set up several years ago. I'll talk a little bit about that as to its importance at the end. We have benefactors that actually are on our high tech advisory board, and then we offer them certain benefits, access to our students, access to our community, access to our building, associated and certain other like seats in our in-house counsel institute, whatnot. So we have benefactors that are both law firm benefactors and company benefactors that help with our funding. We get some operating funds, though not a ton of operating funds. And then also we are on the radar for Cypre. So every now and then we'll get Cypre. So, and those funds we help administer for particular areas like privacy. You can go to the next slide, April. And what makes the High Tech Law Institute at Santa Clara unique? We are very inclusive and were since the beginning in 1998 of what high tech law means. So Santa Clara is pretty highly ranked in intellectual property in the nation every year, but high tech law means so much more than that. So what we really look at is, this is our definition, legal needs of those developing and commercializing technological innovations. So that we wanted to be very inclusive of how we get our students to understand what the legal needs are of so many of the people that are creating technological innovations. And that's what a lot of what we focus on. So it is the law of technology that we focus on mostly, although the technology side of things is starting to creep into many of our classes. We have classes like our artificial intelligence class where students actually do programming and they learn the law of technology. So we are incorporating tech into it as well, but we do focus a lot on law of technology and a lot on teaching students about how technology is developed and commercialized, because that's what they will need to know if they go work with tech clients. And we have a very large alumni base since we've been around for a long time. We average, like I said, of the last 11 years is 62 certificates per year. So we have a large number of alumni out there. And then we have a high involvement with the industry in the Silicon Valley through these various programs. Okay, you can switch, April. Okay, so by contrast, in 2017, I started this more experimental program called the Tech Edge JD. It was actually, origins were in about 2015. We spent 2 years of trying to figure out how can we tap into the JD advantaged and JD jobs in the Silicon Valley more directly. So we had a market analysis done by an external firm that helped us understand how to tap into those jobs. But then also we had engagement with a specific industry task force of venture capitals, general counsels, law firms all around our area. We have our high tech advisory board. We also work with some of our trustees. And we went back and forth for 2 years developing a program where we could tie our students better into those kinds of jobs, made a proposal to faculty that was accepted. So then in 2017 is when they appointed me as the director of the program, and we launched the application. I don't have the requirements for the Tech Edge JD here, but what I'll tell you it's like a certificate program, except it is 100% competency based. So students cannot get the Tech Edge JD by just taking a suite of classes. That's not the way it works. So they have to go and get certain experiences and write reflections on the experiences. One of which, for instance, is working on a problem-solving team with an engineer and a business person. They've got to go get that somewhere. And so also those students can only get into the program on matriculation. So they have to apply to the program when they apply to law school. And I screen them to make sure they have a well-reasoned reason why they want to go into high-tech law, and they're likely to do that. And I actually do a Zoom interview with every one of them. And we choose the students that are going to stay in that profession and want to be in that profession. And then we lock them in for the 3 years to this program. They're not locked. They can change if they want, but they're in this program tracked for the whole 3 years. And they have 2 mentors and an advisor. So they're doing experiential education that's really extracurricular. They have a mentors and an advisor, and they're locked in pretty much, or tracked in at the beginning of their matriculation. So we launched it in 2018 with the first cohort, and here's the numbers. 2018 was 10, 19, 34, 2020, 43, and now, knock on wood, 2021, starting this fall, looks like it's going to be 43 again. So it's, gone up pretty to a pretty large numbers, and it's a pretty large number of the folks that are in our class. And we have 160 mentors and 14 faculty and staff advisors as part of the program. Across the board, what we're seeing early here is higher admissions yield, higher incoming LSAT and GPA, higher GPA once they get here and they're in classes, and then higher placement rate, which is mostly based on summers now. The graduating cohort, almost all are employed at this point, but that's just 10, so I don't find that to be significant yet. Staffing, see all part-time. And the reason for that is to keep costs low. Like Gabe said, that's part of what we're trying to do here. We're being experimental. We're going out there big, going and trying to show some positive results, and then figure that the funding will follow after we show some results. So funding really was, we had startup funding from operational funds and a little bit of gift funds, and usually using fractional time from everyone. What makes this program unique is the rigor, the 2 years worth in designing the program, pre-matriculation identification of the students, competency driven, completely competency driven as opposed to subject matter curriculum, and individualized support through mentors and advisors. Last slide, April. Okay, and so advice, just nuggets of advice. One, for these programs, keep track of the alumni, get their contact information, and stay involved with them, because they can be wonderful allies, donors, whatnot, mentors. Secondly, I think internal marketing is incredibly important, getting the people in the faculty and administration to understand some of those key performance indicators that you are achieving. It's incredibly important to continuously internally market with your colleagues at the university. Development and alumni relations can be really a key partner. If you offer opportunities for like mentoring and whatnot of alumni, they love plugging in people into that process and introducing people into that process, because it helps them with their fundraising goals. And then with respect to the High Tech Law Institute, the quasi-endowment is really, really key. We have been trying to grow our quasi-endowment because it does then protect our gift funds from potentially being used for other purposes, and it ensures longevity of our center. And then finally, from the High Tech Law Institute, having that very broad mission and broad definition of high tech law is really key, because in 1998, when it was formed, intellectual property and patent law was the bomb. That's really what it was founded on, but it had such a broad mission that now it encompasses things like, for instance, privacy and cybersecurity, which, you know, is this new cutting edge thing. So it's wonderful that we had that broad mission from the beginning. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Laura. And now we're going to turn the floor over to Nicole Morris, who is going to talk about the Emory Law and Georgia Tech Tiger program.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone who signed on for this today. Next slide, and I'll kind of share a little bit about this program. So the Tiger program is unique in the sense that it is the first program where it's a cross-institution effort. So we have Georgia Tech, which is a renowned institution, research institution for engineers here in Atlanta, teaming up with the law school at Emory to teach entrepreneurial skills and sort of business and legal framework to both the JD students and the business students from Georgia Tech, and a PhD student. So it's truly multidisciplinary, which I think is one of the most forward-thinking aspects of the program. It was started many years ago, which I think always surprises people when I share that. The program started in 2002 based on an NSF grant that the Georgia Tech researcher received to look at academic research and sort of technologies coming out of university, all of that early stage tech, and a way to commercialize it. So the failures with university tech transfer offices, or just issues in terms of really getting cutting edge research out into the marketplace, how to solve for that through a graduate-based academic education program where you're bringing the PhD student into the classroom with a business and law student, and you're walking them through the framework of commercializing technology. Next slide. I don't have a lot of slides, so this should be fun. So it is technology entrepreneurship at its heart, and we focus on education around sort of the multidisciplinary aspects of that. So you've got the science and engineering expertise from the PhD. So in the team-based learning environment in the classroom, the PhD student is your client, but also the business student is somewhat your client because they have different needs. from a legal perspective. And the students learn about business management, law, economics, and public policy. So the targeted students you see on the screen, the PhDs can come from either institution. We tend to get a lot of engineering disciplines in the program, so that weighs heavily towards Georgia Tech's participation. But we've had some Emory immunologists participate, some pharmacology students. So the science we're agnostic to, which is somewhat nice, because I think it trains the law students from the legal perspective how to deal with a multitude of disciplines. So it's not just coding or software. It could be med tech, it could be AI within a med tech environment, or it could be some more traditional science discipline as well. And I think I have one more slide. So here's kind of the functional structure. And similar to Gabe and what Laura was talking about at Santa Clara, we're still pretty much a certificate-based curriculum-driven program. What's nice about the framework for Tiger is I've evolved things as this explosion in legal tech and innovation in law has come about in the last 5 or 6 years or so. So it's still at its core looking at STEM-based research, but we have other areas within legal education looking at legal tech and the implications of innovation happening in the legal industry that I sort of weave into year 2 of the program. So that's super cool. So fundamentals of innovation is sort of our required curriculum course requirement for the students. It's just one course in the fall, one course in the spring. What's nice about Tiger, I interview students after their first year, really it's the spring of their first year. With a 1-year commitment, I can also include students who are in their second year of law school. So if you are not admitted after your 1L year, you can come back and get a second bite at the apple and participate as a 3L. We can have transfer students participate. We've had maybe 1 or 2 LLMs. It's somewhat unique to have LLMs because they only have a 1-year experience at Emory. So sometimes schedule-wise, it's difficult. But the 1-year requirement allows for a lot of flexibility in terms of the student makeup. And the year 2 is a fall course that I run like an entrepreneurship law course. So it's the framing of your counsel for an early stage enterprise, building on all of that early stage technology commercialization work that was done in the previous year. Now you can really dive into a lot of the heavy legal issues with getting an early stage company out into the marketplace. So corporate formation issues. I have a lecture called Why Startups Fail, employment, tax, and other regulatory issues that just aren't considered fully upfront. We look at capital, VC funding, negotiating term sheets, all that kind of stuff. So it's a nice way to think about all of the various more business-focused issues with an early stage enterprise in that 3rd semester, after you've thought about all of the other technical and how to write a business plan and all of the valuation from a value add perspective in your first year. So you think about, what problem are we solving? How does this technology really address that? Is it the right tool? Is it overly complex in a way that the consumer really won't want it? We learn things about customer discovery and lean startup, and then we move into the 3rd semester and think about the implications. The 3rd semester has also been a place where I will play with modules on legal tech and invite a lot of guest speakers to come talk about what's happening, either from the entrepreneurial law side or from the legal tech side. And that's where there's lots of flexibility in terms of the student experience, and they're required to write a paper. So then they can select a topic of their own interest and pursue that fully in terms of what's happening, what are the legal implications. I've had students write about bankruptcy and cryptocurrency, AI, a lot of the big tech antitrust issues I've had papers and topics on. We looked at health disparity issues in the fall with COVID. So it's sort of my curriculum sandbox, so to speak, in terms of bringing in different ways to think about a capstone experience for students from the Emory Law Tiger perspective, right? We've got some really amazing programs being highlighted today, and I'm taking copious notes. So there's no one size fits all. It's really all about your institution and what your sort of legacy programs and things that work well within your law school. I will say one of the things that Emory has that's unique is we have a transactional law program. So Tiger and the transactional law program are sort of this yin and yang, where there's lots of these business oriented doing deals, contract drafting courses in the transactional law program that a lot of the Tiger students will take as an elective, sort of to build upon their ability to really kind of emerge from their legal education experience with this suite of skills. So I will stop there because I'm pretty sure that's my last slide, and allow the next speaker so we can get these great questions.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. And actually, you had one more slide.
See, this is what happens when you kind of throw it together after 8 o'clock at night, because then you're like, I don't know, these are all the good things. This is a slide that builds. So April, I'm just going to ask you to advance again. So as you think about the experiential learning opportunities, yeah, I think that's the last one. It's segmented through these 3 fundamental disciplines. So we've got science and engineering, for those of you who are like, what is S&E? Science and engineering, so that's your PhD core expertise. Management would be the business, and legal would be the law students. And this is how, in terms of the pedagogy for Tiger, so I think that's why I keep it in any sort of Tiger info presentation that I have, because people are like, well, what's the pedagogical impact, and how would you design this? And this is how it was thought of from the beginning of the program. So IP tends to be one of the legal issues we touch on quite a bit, but as you can tell, particularly now, intellectual property, while it creates competitive advantage and is an important thing to think about up front, there are lots of other issues in terms of business issues with antitrust or just your contractual obligations that we also discuss. Licensing the technology out of the university or some joint development opportunities are also a big deal. So this is sort of here's what we focus on in the curriculum for the program. And I know this is my last slide.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. All right. And so Jeff Ward is going to talk with us about the Duke Center on Law and Tech.
Thanks, April. It's fun to be a part of this, all people that I've looked up to for a long time. I thought I saw a question in the chat I wanted to start with. I want to make sure I go quickly so that we can chat. I think that's the key. But partly because I saw a question in the chat that said, who teaches these courses? And it struck me that I thought I'm the least likely person in the world to teach any of these classes. And I remember back in the day when I used to have phone conversations with Gabe or see Laura at our transactional clinical conferences. I used to direct the Startup Ventures Clinic at Duke. And honestly, my involvement in this, I thought it was just worth sharing. My involvement in this does not come from being an engineer like Nicole or having a computer science background like April. It comes from really a place of ignorance. I think that's really important to share. I was counseling clients and also the students who are serving them in the clinic, and finding that so many of our clients were starting to apply emerging technologies, data-driven technologies to certain industries. And I started to ask the question, why isn't law doing this, right? And in asking that question, I realized that the law had some ground to gain, had a ways to go. And so I started to just feel inadequate, honestly, as a teacher, as a lawyer. And so invested myself in this area to catch up, to do something that I felt we needed to do in the law. I share that anecdote because if anybody's out there is thinking, hey, I don't have the wherewithal to do that, I always want you to remember Jeff and say, good Lord, if Jeff could do it, anybody can do it. And I think that's the most important message I could send. I'll share, if you can go ahead of slide, April. I'll share a few things that the Duke Center on Law and Technology does, but then I want to share 5 pieces of advice. I was trying to think, if I'm sitting in the seat of somebody who's thinking about pushing something forward or advocating at an institutional level, what would I want to hear, or what would I think would be helpful? And I want to focus on that. But the Duke Center on Law and Technology does various things. One of our seminal programs is the Duke Law Tech Lab. We take early stage legal technology startups and help to incubate or accelerate those programs. We provide grant funding and prizes through a pitch competition. We provide weeks worth of expert advice and kind of bespoke mentorship to each of the companies that are accepted to the Duke Law Tech Lab. We'll be celebrating our having our 5th cohort coming up soon. Applications will be available. And all of the companies that we accept are those that are dedicated to expanding access to legal services or access to legal resources. Duke Law by Design, we have trained design facilitators who help to rethink legal processes. We do quite a bit of things there. We work with organizations in our state bar organizations, others. We host design derbies, various kinds of design events. Our digital governance design studio, he's not with us, but Keith Picaro is the director of our digital governance design studio. We focus on data issues and how we can both help data to be productive, but also protect things like privacy, autonomy, et cetera. And we help various organizations, from environmental organizations to health organizations, et cetera, to design data governance policies, data governance processes, et cetera. Duke Law Next is more of like a quasi-curricular type of thing, where during the summer students can engage in activities that aren't nearly as robust as what Gabe showed before about what, but just dabble in the next generation of legal practice, and we help them to engage in that. Our Access Tech Tools initiative is a deliberate collaboration between the center and our clinics. I know many of the law schools who must be chiming in here have really wonderful clinical programs. They're looking oftentimes for ways to leverage technology to expand and improve their service delivery. And that's what we help them to do through human-centered design and technological deployment through the Access Tech Tools initiative. So those are some of the things we do. We do a whole lot, but do you mind going to the next slide, April? The one thing I wanted to say is that if I'm sitting in the seat of anybody who's thinking about launching a center, I think we call this creating, building, and growing. That sounds ominous to me, right? Like, oh my gosh, I have to create it, build it, grow it. There's funding questions, there's support questions. People are asking about getting other faculty on board. These are all really good questions. One thing I would start with, and this is the first of my 5 pieces of advice, is that every institution has priorities, right? And legal technology is not just one thing. It fits into so many of those priorities. So I wanted to share this quotation from our dean, Dean Carrie Abrams. And she said, "We're proud of Duke Law's research and leadership in tech and innovation." And she names one specific thing. The Duke Law Tech Lab is one of several ways we support those shaping next generation lawyering and bringing about expanded access to legal services. One thing our dean cares very much about, much to her credit, is expanding access to legal services, closing the access to justice gap, developing and expanding our public interest and pro bono programs. And one thing that was important then was to show her and help get her on board with the fact that legal technology has a role to play in that. Now that happened at Duke, and that got her on board, and she's all excited, and she speaks about our technology efforts in many ways now. But that might not be true for your dean or your faculty or whoever it is. So I just wanted to highlight that one of the things you want to do is find institutional support. And I think there's many ways to do that, which leads me to my second piece of advice, which is that, and Nicole already said it. Nicole said exactly this is not one size fits all. And she said it better than I could. But I just wanted to let people know that there's many paths to developing this, and that actually that's the way we want it. We're here today as a few people showing what we're doing. The last thing I would want is for people to walk away and say, oh, I have to do it the way that Duke did it, or I have to do it the way Suffolk did it, or I have to do it the way that Emory has done it. That's very much not true. There are many paths to this. I think what we often share as a group, though, is that we all believe that law could have a better tomorrow, that we could serve more people, that we could do it better, more efficiently, with greater integrity, more cost effectiveness, all those kinds of things. And so there's a lot to share there. So I would think, what are your motivations? Is it As Laura mentioned, community engagement, she really highlighted that with her alums and other community organizations, and I'm not surprised by that, given that Laura has a clinical background as I do. Is it jobs that Gabe highlighted, those wonderful, wonderful positions that Gabe named? Is that what you're doing it for? Is it to help with fundraising? Is it because you're trying to keep a faculty member and this is like a fun toy box for him or her to play in? You know, there's all sorts of reasons why you might do it. And I think they're all valid reasons. So I would, just encourage people to not think that there's a, as Nicole said, a one size fits all. That's piece of advice number 2. Just 3 more, and then I'll finish and make sure we get to questions. This one is probably the number one thing I want to highlight more than anything else. And that's that if you are going to engage in this arena, as I hope many of you do, please know that it is the most collaborative arena that you could possibly engage in. And I say that for a lot of reasons. If you're thinking, holy cow, there's a lot to do here. How do we bring in the expertise? Please don't think that you have to do it all. If there's one thing I've learned in several years now of doing this, is that this is a group of kindred spirits. This is a group of people who are not setting out to do something only for their students. So they're doing it because they want to make the law better in the future. And all we want to do is collaborate. So for example, our most recent Duke Law Design Derby, our Design Derby, the team that I was most impressed by came from April's institution, North Carolina Central University, the School of Law. They rocked it. They were amazing. And because we opened up our activities to all schools in North Carolina, all law schools to take part. There are teams from Wake Forest. We collaborate all the time with Campbell Law School, UNC, etc. And that's the spirit. Similarly, right now we're working on data governance issues through our digital governance design studio with Suffolk. You saw a picture of him, David Colarusso, who heads the Lit Lab. We're working with him on a tool that they're using called Spot, or building called Spot, and we're collaborating in that way, and we're very happy to do so. David also just hosted, just the other night, a group of technology labs from all around the world who got together and shared ideas and talked about collaborations. And that, just get ready to say, I don't have to do it all myself. I can collaborate with other wonderful people. And April, this is a special note for you because you're just miles down the road from us. We're neighbors, NCCU and Duke. Always want to collaborate with NCCU moving forward. 4th piece of advice, don't do everything, but do something. I think law as a whole is not the best at being entrepreneurial. And so I think one benefit of a center is that it gives you a place where you can quite literally, not literally, but quite, throw things at the wall and see what sticks. Don't think that you have to set up from the beginning and do exactly what you're going to be doing down the road, because I would guess Laura, Nicole, April, Gabe, all of us would share that we've probably shifted and changed and iterated as we've moved forward. And I think that's totally true. I love that Laura said, let's keep high-tech law relevant. Even the things that are well established have to be reconsidered and think about how they're relevant. So start with something, but don't feel like you have to do everything. And then the last thing is just how interdisciplinary this area is. We've talked about design. We've talked about technology, computer science, engineering, etc. This is a place where it doesn't make sense for this to be only at a law school. Many of the solutions that we're trying to build and provide require, in fact, that we reach beyond the scope of the law school. And so I know every law school is differently situated. We happen to have a really wonderful engineering school on campus, but let's say I was at American where there might not be. I would reach out to UDC and try to build University of District Columbia, and try to build something wonderful like the Tiger program where there's a collaboration. That's one way to do it. But one resource that if I had to make a special plug for any resource that I don't want people to overlook, librarians. They're the best. Librarians are oftentimes so far ahead of law faculty, law practitioners, etc., at thinking about the ways that legal technology can help us. So if you're one of those people who chimed in and said, how do we find people who are champions of what we're doing? I really could not highlight enough librarians. They are, they're just angels in so many ways, but in this area in particular, they tend to be really forward-looking. So that would be my last piece of advice. And now I will be quiet and make sure we have some time for discussion.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, all of the panelists. You all were fantastic. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go through some questions. Let's see. the first thing that I want to say, though, is I completely echo Jeff's point about collaboration. One of the reasons why, when we were thinking about doing this panel, I was like, I know the perfect people. Each one of these folks I have reached out to personally, and they have given us wonderful advice as we here at North Carolina Central University School of Law are starting our law and technology program. So it will be launching in the fall. And no one has said no. And in fact, they're like, yes, we're willing to help you. So just know that there are people, this is a great community. This section is a great section, and you don't have to do it all alone. Let's see. So there were a couple of questions. Faculty buy-in. So Gabe mentioned this. He was saying bringing in people to come and talk to the faculty, because a center or an initiative or a program will not be successful if you don't have buy-in from the faculty. We know this. So how do you get faculty on board? So bringing speakers in. One thing that I've always emphasized to my faculty and anyone who's in the academy is to go to the ABA Tech Show. I mean, if you want to know what's going on in the practice of law as it relates to technology, just go to the Tech Show. It was great that it was virtual this year, so I think more academics were able to participate. Next year, I'm not sure if it's going to be virtual, maybe it'll be a hybrid, but that's a place where you can go to find out what's going on. So encouraging faculty to do that. Hopefully this year, since we've all had to become acclimated to Zoom, faculty are more in tune with the need to make sure that we embrace technology. But I wanted to give our other panelists any other suggestions on how to get faculty buy-in, since it's so crucial.
I
One of
want
the-
to add,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Nicole.
yeah, I will just say, one of the ways that I think the Emory Tiger program has sort of kept faculty interest is we actually rely on our existing faculty as internal experts, right? So I've had my colleagues come talk on their pedagogical sort of scholarly areas of interest and use them for resources for guest speakers, right? So they feel at least tangentially still involved. So that's just a small way to try to keep, you know, our colleagues' egos stroked on how they're relevant for what we're doing.
Thank you. Laura?
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things we do. It turns out that because if you're in kind of the technology space, there tends to be a little bit more funding, for instance, than social justice or criminal justice, some of those other areas, right? Just because firms and companies and whatnot have more money. So one of the ways that we kind of get people excited about technology is to find ways to collaborate on issues of social justice using technology and really involve some of our scholars and faculty in those areas to do kind of joint projects. So the students are learning technology tools, learning, you know, those sorts of skills, but then also we're involving some of these other faculty who get this exposure as to why it may benefit them. And then, you know, there's potentially more funding sources or at least more opportunities to get their community together and get their community involved as well.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just in case it's helpful, I think to answer this question, there may be 3 buckets of faculty that I think it's helpful to maybe artificially divide, but one is the practice or experiential based practice, because they're going to be most willing, I think, to think about the technology of legal practice, right? So whether it's e-discovery or contract diligence or whatever it might be, they're already prone to do that. Another bucket is the law of technology, which is oftentimes an IP faculty. So if you have an IP faculty, or that's a group that's already willing to think about those topics, as Laura and others mentioned before. But the last group, which is maybe those that you don't think about, you know, they're the most doctrinal, have been out of practice for maybe a long time, and also aren't talking about IP or whatever it might be, kind of the way that technology shapes the world. One thing I do is I just frequently send articles to those faculty, like, hey, art law faculty member, who's wonderful, by the way, but isn't thinking about these, look at how generative adversarial networks are creating new artistic expression and raising copyright, all these different things. Would you be interested in that? And she gave the most wonderful, absolutely lovely talk to our students then about the intersection of art law and these new technologies. And all of a sudden, we have a new kind of faculty expert on us. And not everything will take, but I do get a little bit annoying, and I would encourage you to do the same. Send along things that are just of interest in those different areas, and every once in a while, a fish will bite.
Great, thank you. Great responses. So there's a related question about student buy-in, right? So are we having to convince students that they should be, interested in this and encourage them to take these classes? Gabe, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, glad to take that one. So one of the things that we did early on with students is we purchased every incoming 1L a copy of Tomorrow's Lawyers by Richard Susskind. So if you haven't read that book, it's, for me, was formative in terms of thinking about the future of legal work. It's a relatively thin book, maybe 200 pages, and you can read it in an afternoon. And it lays out a vision for how law might look differently. When students arrive during orientation, we include a couple of units that are relevant to sort of seeding this sort of thought. One is on where legal jobs are. And we have a very data-driven talk about where our alums get hired, what sort of work they're doing, what opportunities that we see, what opportunities we see growing, and what opportunities we see shrinking. And this is a growth area. And then the third thing that we do is that we actually take a 45-minute piece of our orientation, and we teach every incoming 1L to use a tool called Q&A markup, which is a sort of gateway drug to expert systems. And what we say is, at the end of this talk, even if you're not even competent to use Word, you will have launched a real live app that solves a legal problem that's real and uses AI. And I can guarantee that'll happen. And sure enough, we're able to deliver every single time. So check out qnamarkup.org. Incidentally, our student organization, LITSA, Legal Innovation and Tech Student Association, has something like 250 members in it. And, again, it's free to join. It's not like it's a high barrier to entry, but people are interested in this. And once they become part of that, it's like any good social media marketing. They're on the list. They're going to get bombarded with invitations and ideas and job opportunities. And it is a positive feedback loop. Incidentally, if anyone is interested in teaching Q&A markup, it is free, it is open source, and just hit me up offline. I'll be glad to share the exercise we use and you can adapt for your school.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share thoughts about student buy-in? I think the young folk are, well, I say young, but ages of folks of all ages go to law school. But I have found that they are eager and willing, and oftentimes they are more aware of what's going on kind of in the tech space, and they're eager for this. So. Let's see, there were some questions about who should teach. So your thoughts. So you all have already shared thoughts about getting your professors who are actually already in the building to teach, to help with buy-in. But there are some specific tech areas where there may not be anyone, on campus or at the law school who's able to teach. How do you reach out and find adjuncts who might be able to teach some of these really specific tech classes?
I was just going to say, we literally do exactly what you said, April. We go and recruit people. And sometimes that is, we don't necessarily know, they're not in our network or whatever, but we go see who's writing blogs about these things, who's writing books about these things, and try to recruit people to come in and teach, as an adjunct for these things. So we actually are going out and trying to find people and bring them in to teach these things.
Great. Any other thoughts on who teaches?
This is very much on, we do that too, Laura. I think that's exactly right. So total echo, but I just wanted to add one other thing. I think there's, for folks who are in an institution that's like a full university with lots of different departments, I think there's an increasing appetite for co-hiring. And so just so that we're covering all the bases, I wanted to make sure that I think it's important to get involved with university level hiring decisions and strategic planning, because oftentimes you have a computer science department, for instance, where they're saying, holy cow, we used to teach computer scientists to be technicians, and now they want to be social architects, because they are, right? Technology is reshaping the way we interact as human beings. They need ethical analysis of AI. They need ethical technology development thinking. Who can offer that? The law school, the policy school, other. So they're starting to want to have joint hires. So on the away from like the one-off adjunct or whatever, also some of this like tenure level hiring is oftentimes happening at a place that could really benefit your law schools if you get involved with those other departments.
Mhm. Great. We have a few more minutes left. I'm looking at the questions. Let's see. Dennis Kennedy asked, what's the best way to get involved in the AALS section on technology, law, and legal education? Gabe, that one goes to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Come on and join us. Everyone here that's not involved in the section, come join us. There's a wonderful and robust community. People like April and Leanne put together regular events like this. Join the section if your school is a member. You'll get regular updates on what's going on. If you can make it to AALS, come hang out with us. And otherwise, just keep your eyes open. This stuff is all out there. It's all for you. It's all free of charge for people that are in there. And it's a good group of folks.
Great. Let's see. There's a question. Karen has a question about, she teaches legal writing. She's trying to develop a basic legal tech program. Her time is so limited. Any advice? I'm going to mention Dennis Kennedy. And this goes back to Jeff's point about this being a collaborative community. So you can find syllabi that's available. If you find a course that you like, call up that professor, send that professor an email. I taught a legal technology leadership class last summer, and I just took Dennis's syllabus from his legal technology leadership class and just use that. And so yeah, find someone who's doing something that you're interested in, and they will provide you with as much material, I'm sure, as you can. Gabe?
Yes, thank you. So I taught legal writing for 10 years. I was hired and tenured as a legal writing professor. I miss the days of teaching legal writing. And something I say every year, every chance I get at every faculty meeting, legal technology is a legal practice skill. For those of you who recognize that legal writing isn't like commas and semicolons, it is a whole way of thought about approaching the profession, and getting these two things in simpatico is important. So I have one wonderful colleague, Diane O'Leary. She's made it a practice to create a number of exercises that teach this intersection of legal tech and legal innovation. An example, there are all these wonderful new tech tools out there that improve legal research or help you pull apart a contract in a new way, or help you do data analysis about a claim. Creating a short exercise and saying, hey, let's match this with a torts unit or a contracts unit, creates allies on the faculty and reinforces this thing, which is a truism. We shouldn't have to sell this, that legal innovation in tech is part of the core of what legal writing professors do. They're, along with law librarians and clinicians, the most natural allies out there for legal technologists.
Mm-hmm. All right, we only have a few more minutes. I just wanted to let everyone know that this is being recorded. We will send out a link to the recording if you want to go back and check anything out. We're also going to provide the materials. I am taking a screenshot of the chat. There are some wonderful links within the chat. We will include those with the materials as well. We're going to try to capture the Q&A. There have been a few questions we haven't been able to get to. Just want to say our panelists, I know that they are willing to, provide you with whatever support, they can. So definitely reach out to any of them. Definitely reach out to the section, Leanne and myself and Gabe, of course. And we have other webinars that are going on this summer. And with that, I'm going to share my screen again and then turn it back over to Leanne.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. April, Gabe, Laura, Nicole, and Jeff, this was just fabulous. I especially appreciated the conversation here at the end about just sort of the strategic ways that we can kind of work this in, get it in front of students, in front of faculty, and gain buy-in. So really just awesome discussion. Yes, we will be back at same time, same station next week and throughout the summer with different webinars on legal technology. Next week, we are back with a program on creating a diversity tech law pipeline. And you can see the others on the screen. I don't need to read those for you, but we'll be running all summer through the early part of August. So I hope you're able to continue joining us for follow-up sessions at this same time, and information will be sent out obviously on the AALS listserv, but you can also go to the website and look for information on these future sessions as well. As April said, we will have we'll be sending out after this the materials from this session, as well as a link to a survey. Please do fill it out. We would love to hear your feedback for either our presenters today or just generally the kinds of things that you would like to hear about from this section and in this webinar series. And do consider joining the section on technology, law, and legal education. I've had the pleasure of being part of it for the last couple of years, and it's fantastic. It's timely. It's so relevant to the work that we're doing, and really needed by our students. And so we would love to see you as part of it. So thank you so much for being here today, panelists, and April. Thank you again. So good to see all of you, and we will see you next week. Well done. Thanks, everyone.